This is Bible Academy. We continue our study in the book of Acts, chapter 23, verse 10. Now, before we get started, as always, it's imperative that you make sure that you confess your known sins, that you're right with the Lord, having dealt with your known sins, and that you're allowing the Spirit of God, who indwells you, to control you, so we can get the most out of our study. This is always vitally important, not only to live our lives, but I point that out in during our Bible studies because it's something we sometimes forget. It becomes too routine in going about our lives, but we need to make sure that we're consistently confessing our sin. And then when we come to something like this, especially a Bible study, to make sure that we're allowing the Spirit to control us, which should be a moment-by-moment thing anyway. So this is also just a reminder. Let's pray. Well, Heavenly Father, we thank you again for this opportunity, the privilege, the time, the freedom, the good health, all the things you provided so we can study your word. We ask that our hearts and minds be open and ready to receive it. In Jesus' name, amen. In our outline, we are under Roman numeral 7a-4. Paul still before the Jewish council. If you recall, he's just brought in the issue of the Gentiles and what he's been doing with them. This seems to confirm his listeners, those who are listening to him, that he had been to the Gentiles and was mingling, going way too far with them. Well, when he brought this point up, verse 22, they were listening to him until he said this. Then they raised their voices and said, "Away with such a one from the earth, for he shall not be allowed to live." While they were screaming and throwing off their cloaks and tossing dust into the air, the tribune ordered him to be brought into the barracks. He told them to examine him by flogging to find out why they were shouting against him like this. But when he had stretched him out for the straps, Paul said to the centurion who was standing by, "Is it lawful for you to flog a Roman citizen and uncondemned?" When the centurion heard this, he went to the tribune and said to him, "What are you about to do? For this man is a Roman citizen." So the tribune came and asked him, "Tell me, are you a Roman citizen?" And he said, "Yes." The tribune answered, "I bought this citizenship for a large sum." Paul said, "But I am a citizen by birth." So those who were about to examine him withdrew from him immediately. And the tribune also was afraid, for he realized that Paul was a Roman citizen and that he had bound him. But on the next day, the tribune, desiring to know the real reason why he, Paul, was being accused by the Jews, he unbound him and commanded the chief priests and all the council to meet. And he brought Paul down and set him before them. Chapter 23, verse 1. And looking intently at the council, Paul said, "Men, brothers, I've lived my life before God in all good conscience up to this day." And the high priest Ananias commanded those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, "God is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. Are you sitting to judge me according to the law, and yet contrary to the law, you order me to be struck?" Those who stood by said, "Would you revile God's high priest?" And Paul said, "I did not know, brothers, that he was the high priest, for it is written, 'You shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people.'" Now when Paul perceived that one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, he cried out in the council, "Brothers, I am a Pharisee, a son of Pharisees, I am on trial concerning the hope of the resurrection of the dead. And when he had said this, a dissension arose between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. For the Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, nor angel, nor spirit, but the Pharisees acknowledge them all. Well, they continue to have this discussion, verse 10. And when the dissension became great, the tribune, afraid that Paul would be torn to pieces by them, ordered a detachment of soldiers to go down and take him away from them by force and bring him into the barracks. He was about to be torn to pieces, figuratively meaning he was about to probably have his clothes stripped and start to be beaten. The term here, let's look at it just for a moment. Diaspao, tear apart or tear up, is about to be torn up by them. So the soldiers go down, take him away, take them back to the fortress and to the barracks. That would be the barracks of the fortress area. So what we had here was a dissension between the two groups who were about to tear him up and attack Paul. Again, the tribune had to intervene to bring order and rescue Paul, but did not know Paul was a Roman citizen. I point that out because this comes up later. The tribune still did not know also why they were so opposed to him. He looked like he was one of them, so they brought Paul back under protective custody. Let's stop here for some application. Short, basically review what we've seen with Paul. Paul had defended his faith and communicated it effectively to connect to his audience. Sometimes the audience was hostile in their response, other times they were not. Now, communicating effectively to an audience, of course, is important. Whom one is speaking to is an important consideration when giving a testimony. For example, what is their background, including their culture, their understanding of God? What would be the biggest issue between the gospel and them? Beware of false issues and do not make something unimportant hinder the gospel presentation. And learn to transition from one topic to the most important topic. In other words, whatever your topic you're talking about, transition it over to the gospel if that's necessary. If you're talking to someone about the Muslims, or maybe they are Muslim, and they talk about Allah and the Quran and what they view of Jesus, you'd want to transition over to who Jesus is in your view. Now, they might know that already, but you can begin to point out some differences. Though you might agree that Jesus existed, of course he did, they would view him differently. They viewed him just as a prophet. You'd want to show where he's more than a prophet if they're open to it. Now, that's the thing. If they're not open to it, you're probably not going to get very far with it, but at least you have a common ground to begin on. Sometimes people will say how they're telling the Muslims how their Quran is not really that accurate. Well, I had one young man tell me this one time, and I pointed out to him, their view of God isn't even accurate. So you need to even back up further if you're going to get into a thorough conversation with them. But again, the issue really is, who is Christ? Not debating the Quran, though that can become a launching pad. Not debating even Allah, but point out who God really is. and then move on to the gospel. So you have to be on your toes, so to speak, thinking about what they're thinking while you're moving towards the issue of the gospel. Now, Paul was able to do this type of thing with a number of different groups and did it respectfully. Even when he went too hard at the high priest after they violated his rights, he backed off and apologized, but then picked up his speech where he left off. Now, another thing we're going to see here, and keep this in mind, Paul did not make a point of the old covenant being phased out with this group, which would soon, if not already, make the position of the high priest and the specialness of the temple become obsolete. As with so many people who have a religious background, it takes years of unlearning their religion. So you may have to stay within their culture, their tradition, to get some truth in. Because if you turn them off with those things, which become really unimportant, but they can become barriers. But if you turn them off with showing them how wrong they are on all of this, it may not get any ear for the gospel. For Paul, right now, he will not argue the point, but he will be a Jew to the Jews. They respected the high priest, he would respect the high priest. They respect the law, he would respect the law. But see, they're not even saved yet. Once they're saved, then he can move to the other issues, as we've seen him do so many times. Well, now Paul finds himself stuck in a fortress, perhaps another prison cell. We're not told exactly. But he was probably not in a prison cell since he was a Roman. Well, he's actually going to reveal that in a few moments. But he's not known yet to be a Roman citizen, so he could be in a prison cell. Remember, his original plan was to spend some time in Jerusalem and then go on to Rome, but it's not looking good. In fact, it looked like his life might come to an abrupt end in any number of ways. But the following night he had a visitor. Verse 11. The following night the Lord stood by him and said, "Have courage, for as you have testified to the facts about me in Jerusalem, so you must testify also in Rome." You must. He will. So as has happened before, the Lord shows up at just the right time with just the right words for just what he needs. The Lord begins by saying, "Have courage." No doubt, Paul was somewhat fearful now. Whether he was afraid to die or not, there's always the unknown factor of what's that going to be like. And he didn't want to die really before he wanted to complete what he thought was part of his mission, and that was to visit Rome and strengthen the believers there. The Lord explains why he should have courage in the second part of the verse. "For as you have testified to the facts about me in Jerusalem, you must testify also in Rome." He was going to go to Rome. The Lord told him. And this is just what Paul needed to hear, and with perfect timing. This word of encouragement with the promise he would go to Rome must have strengthened him a lot in this next couple of years, which he's going to have to face more difficult times. And he would get to testify more there, including the next plot to have him killed. So Paul is going to go through another difficult time, and we're going to see how this develops in our next section. Section 5, subsection I should say, the plot against Paul uncovered 23:12 through 22. Verse 12. When it was day, the Jews made a plot and bound themselves by an oath neither to eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. The idea of an oath here is actually put oneself under a curse. They put themselves under a curse. This conspiracy group that formed up supported their commitment by taking a vow to not eat or drink till Paul is killed. Now think how twisted this is. They take a vow before God to have him put them under a curse if they could not assassinate Paul. In actuality, they're saying, if God will not let them murder Paul, then they are to be cursed by God. So they want God on their side in violating a divine law. And this shows us how distorted the thinking of fanatical religious people can get. They're going to murder, in other words, they're going to murder in the name of God. Verse 13 tells us about the number here who are going to do this. There were more than 40 who formed this conspiracy. Perhaps some of these were the same people who had instigated the riots. Also, those had come down from Asia. Verse 14. So these more than 40, verse 14, they went to the chief priests and elders and said, we have strictly bound ourselves by an oath to taste no food till we have killed Paul. Now understand there are different types of vows allowed by the rabbis. Some allowed for exceptions, if for some reason it could not be fulfilled. This would be one of those vows. Now they had every intention of fulfilling it. If it wasn't one of those vows, then these men would have starved to death, because we know what happened. Verse 15, they begin to give us the plan here. Here's what they tell the leaders. Now therefore you, along with the council, give notice to the tribune to bring him down to you, as though you were going to determine his case more accurately. We are ready to kill him before he comes near. The plot by the assassins was to give the chief priest and the Sanhedrin, to get them to send for Paul under the pretext of further questioning. The phrase here, to determine his case more accurately, the idea is so he gets the impression that you're going to deliberate and conduct a more thorough inquiry. Now they needed to get Paul out of the fortress and out from out onto the streets and away from those Roman guards. So on the way down, they would kill him. It says here at the end, we are ready to kill him. Murdering, breaking one of the 10 Commandments. Now both the chief priest and the Sanhedrin council went along with this, with the group wanting to assassinate Paul, showing their complicity with the assassins, and that they too were ready to make an exception to the Mosaic and Roman law. See how these sticklers of the law are willing to make exceptions and break the law themselves for their own interest? Never trust religious fanatics, because in the name of their religion, in this case how they distort the Mosaic law, because in the name of their religion, they will justify doing criminal activities. That's often the case with many movements that move to mob violence. They justify the violence in the name of their movement, even though their violence is more criminal than what they're trying to protest. Or just as criminal. Now we see that Paul was right after all when he called that high priest a whitewashed wall. He wasn't really what he claimed to be, an upstanding leader keeping the high standards of the law. He was just a whitewashed wall. He looked like he did, but he didn't really underneath. Verse 16. Now the son of Paul's sister, this is usually taken as a surprise if you weren't aware of this. Now the son of Paul's sister, yes, Paul had a sister, heard of their ambush. So he went and entered the barracks of the fortress and told Paul. We have little knowledge of Paul's immediate family, though we do see here he has a sister and a nephew. How the nephew heard of this plot, we do not know. Well, he visits Paul. Visitors were allowed for a Roman citizen under these particular circumstances. Well, Paul hears what he has to say. Verse 17. Paul called one of the centurions and said, "Take this young man to the tribune, for he has something to tell him." Now, the young man here would have been probably in his late teens or early 20s. So the centurion, verse 18, took him and brought him to the tribune and said, "Paul the prisoner called me and asked me to bring this young man to you, as he has something to say to you." Now remember, Paul's called here a prisoner. He is a prisoner. So he's not free to leave, and that's where you might get the idea he's actually in a cell for something he did seriously. So here's the nephew before the tribune to relay the message he had brought to Paul. Verse 19. The tribune took him by the hand. To me, that indicates he was a young man, probably in his mid-teens, maybe in his late teens. We just don't know. And going aside, asked him privately, "What is it that you have to tell me?" Let's look at the next two verses together. So the young man is speaking now. And he said, "The Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul down to the council tomorrow, as if they were going to inquire more thoroughly about him. But do not be persuaded by them, for more than 40 of their own men are lying in ambush for him, who have bound themselves by an oath neither to eat nor drink till they have killed him. And now they are ready, waiting for your consent." So this tells us about the setup that's going on with these assassins. They're waiting for just the tribune to consent to agree to send Paul down into their trap. Verse 22. So the tribune dismissed the young man, directing him, "Tell no one that you have informed me of these things." The idea of directing here, parangelo, means to charge or order. I'll just put the word up there for a moment. Don't see it too often. To charge or order. Basically, he orders the young man, "Don't tell anybody what you just told me." So here we see the tribune takes the threat seriously. He tells the nephew not to tell anyone what he had told him. And then he calls for an immediate escort. We're going to see that in a moment. He's going to have Paul escorted to get him out of the city of Jerusalem and down to Caesarea. You see, the tribune knew the type of people he was dealing with. He'd been around. Point 6. Subpoint 6. Paul is sent to Caesarea and then on to Felix, 23 through 35. So he's going to call for this escort, which we see begin in verse 23. Then he called to the centurions and said, "Get ready 200 soldiers with 70 cavalry and 200 spearmen to go as far as Caesarea at the 3rd hour of the night." That should be 7 cavalry. I said that wrong. That's often a mistake people make. Calvary, of course, refers to the cross. Cavalry is horsemen. It's a matter of where you place the L. So, he calls for 200 soldiers, that's the infantry, 70 cavalry, spearmen, strange word here. We don't know for sure exactly what this means, but I'll show it to you and you can see the translations. Dexialabos, not sure, like I said, what the term means. Some kind of soldier, perhaps carrying lances. Some thought they may have been ones who basically was towing horses, extra horses. That could have been the case. Maybe the soldiers were often on the horses to keep things moving along fast out of the area. We're not certain. But I translated as spearmen, as so many do, but we're not 100% certain. Well, they're going to go to Caesarea. Now, Caesarea, if you remember, we've been there before, is about 65 miles away, and that's provincial capital. That's the provincial capital where the governor is, or the procurator. And he wants them to leave the 3rd hour of the night. That's at 9 p.m. So let's read this in its entirety. Then he called 2 of the centurions and said, "Get ready 200 soldiers with 70 cavalry and 200 spearmen to go as far as Caesarea at the 3rd hour of the night." So he has about 470 men, which is almost a cohort. Cohort was 600 men. So he sends a good part of his command, it looks like, on this trip. Verse 24. Also provide mounts for Paul to ride and bring him safely to Felix the governor. Now, Felix the governor is in Caesarea. Remember, I just said it was a provincial capital. Now, this is Felix the governor, or sometimes called the procurator, if you want to stay with the Latin. This is Antonius Felix, a freedman of Antonia, mother of the Emperor Claudius. So his mother, what I'm saying, her name was Antonia. And his name is Antonius Felix. And Antonia was the mother of the Emperor Claudius. So that was his name. He was the brother of Paulos and became procurator of Palestine in AD 52-53. His administration was notorious for its corruption, cynicism, and cruelty. According to the historian Tacitus, or Tacitus, Felix reveled in cruelty and lust and wielded the power of a king with the mind of a slave. End quote. He's called here a governor. That's a term used for leaders. I'll show it to you for a moment. Hegemon, one who rules, a leader, provincial administrator. In this case, we have him translated governor. Pontius Pilate is one of these, by the way. Pontius Pilate was one. So, once the tribune dismisses the nephew, telling him to stay quiet about what he just told him, He orders 2 of his centurions to mount a large detachment to have Paul escorted out of town. They provided a mount for Paul, indicating they wanted to move as quickly as possible. Heavily guarded, the tribune had Paul taken out that night, not wanting to give anyone any time or even see them so they might react to what he's doing. He's under heavy guard as he's escorted to Caesarea to see Felix, the procurator, or we've been calling him the governor. We will not see Paul in Jerusalem again. So the tribune sends his problem with Paul up the chain of command with a letter. Verse 25, very short verse, and he wrote a letter to this effect. To this effect basically means literally having this form, something like this. Now, Luke probably would have not known the details of this letter, but could have got a good idea from Paul later on. After Paul had heard Felix read it or act on it. Some scholars argue it was verbatim, but we don't know that for certain. But it starts out sounding like it's verbatim, but this is a common opening. Claudius Lysias, to His Excellency the Governor Felix, greetings. Here we see the common salutation. This is what would be expected, the names of the sender, the recipient, and greetings. This is the first time we're given the name of the tribune, though he's been a major character here the last several verses. His name is Claudius Lysias. Now, with a name like this, we got a good idea of his background. He would be a free-born Greek, probably a free-born Greek who had worked his way up through the ranks of the Roman army and at some time paid an official of Claudius's government for his Roman citizenship. At that time, his Greek name would have been Lysias. So at this time, his Greek name Lysias became his Roman cognomen, and he then took the nomen Claudius in honor of the emperor. Now, Felix was governor from AD 52 to 59. He's called Excellency, Kartistos. That originally stood for a member of the Roman equestrian order, like that of the knights in Britain. Later became an honorific title for highly placed officials in the Roman government, as here, 24:3 and 26:25. But it's also used as a form of polite address. Verses 27 through 30 get into the body of the letter, which is going to inform Felix of what had happened from the riot in the temple to the tribune's discovery of the plot. So let's go back, and this will go further rather rapidly, because it's the stuff we know. The man was seized by the Jews and was about to be killed by them when I came upon them with a detachment of soldiers and rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman citizen. Now, he tells a story like he had just rescued a Roman citizen, but we know the truth of the matter. He didn't know he was a Roman citizen, but he did get there just in the nick of time. So he didn't find out Paul was a Roman citizen until he got him back to the fortress. He was about to torture him. Remember that? Verse 28. His letter continues. And desiring to know the charge for which they were accusing him, I brought him down to their council. Verse 29 gives us the most important part of the letter. Well, at least for Paul. I found that he was being accused about questions of their law, but charged with nothing deserving death or imprisonment. So the Roman tribune recognized that this is a religious matter rather than a civil dispute, and he would find that Felix would probably be in agreement with this. And then he goes on to say, but charged with nothing deserving death or imprisonment. Now, by the way, this is the same type of language Luke used for Jesus back in Luke 23:14 through 15. There was no serious charge against Jesus. Even with no charge worthy of death, there's no effort to release Paul. So we see the injustice even plays into God's plan. Did you hear that? I didn't say God was unjust, but injustice plays into God's plan. Man uses his free will, is unjust, but God has a way of using even that for what's best for Paul. Verse 30. And when it was disclosed to me that there would be a plot against the man, I sent him to you at once, ordering his accusers also to state before you what they have against him. Now, there was not a serious charge against Paul as far as the Roman government was concerned, but the tribune could not let them kill a Roman citizen, which had been another reason to let Felix make this judgment. What are they going to do with him? They can't let him just run free. They're going to kill him. And he's a Roman citizen. Well, that's what was in the letter. Now, they haven't left yet to go to Caesarea, but that basically told us what was in the content of the letter. Well, now we have the soldiers setting out towards Caesarea. That picks up the story in verse 31. So the soldiers, according to their orders, took Paul and brought him by night to Antipatris. Now, this is a city in Judea, 37 miles northwest of Jerusalem, assuming that's the city now that's there, or the ruins that's there now, though we're not 100% sure, but there's a good chance. That's why I go ahead and sound like it is. Very good chance, I should say. So just over halfway, there's a stop. What happens? So what happens, these soldiers with Paul stop at Antipatris. That's kind of English pronunciation, the Latin Antipatris. That is what I'm saying, actually, the Latin pronunciation. So they stay there for a short time, and on the next day, they return to the fortress, letting the I just misspelled it again, cavalry go with them. You know, it's funny, the spell correction didn't fix this. Anyway, just have it. Okay. Now, since they're out of range and probably very little danger of anybody catching up with them, especially since they've been on horseback and the soldiers are probably trotting along the way, we might call it jogging, they would have very likely have outdistanced any followers, not to mention they'd be quite discouraged to see all these soldiers guarding Paul. Well, the infantry breaks off from the escort, and they return back to the fortress of Anthony or Antonio in Jerusalem. So now they're going to go on with just the cavalry. So the cavalry with Paul goes on to Caesarea. Verse 33. When they had come to Caesarea and delivered the letter to the governor, they presented Paul also before him. Verse 34. On reading the letter, he asked what province he was from. And when he learned that he was from Cilicia, let's just pause here in the middle of this sentence. He asked him what province he was from. Now, why would he do that? Well, because each province had their own ruler. So he had to make the judgment whether he needed to send him back to his home province. But you see, the offense was in his own province, was in Felix's province. Now, if had it been one of the larger provinces, he might have sent him back. The problem with that is you got to send your witnesses up there too, and that's a lot of travel to send someone clear back to Cilicia. So he deemed it best to try him there in the province where the offense took place rather than send him back to Cilicia, the province of his home. And he could rule the case fairly. Verse 35. He said, I will give you a hearing when your accusers arrive too. Then he ordered that Paul be kept under guard in Herod's palace. Now, it's called Herod's palace. Herod's not there anymore, of course. But that's what it's been called since he had built it. So he's going to have a hearing. That's a legal hearing to see if it needed to go to court. Now, Herod's palace, interesting, was built in Caesarea by Herod the Great. These events that we see taking place now would have taken place in 56 to 57 A.D. And Paul's going to spend 2 years in prison here. So we leave Paul in Herod's palace under guard while they wait for the accusers from Jerusalem to come up there. Let's do somewhat of a summary here of what we've seen with Paul's life at this point. Some of the things that we've seen him go through and his attitude. It's a reminder also to us of how God can use us. So here we have Paul, one of the great servants of God, willing to over and over again risk his life to carry out the mission the Lord has given him. He's smart, articulate, knows his scripture, has an education and background second to none, a Pharisee and a Roman citizen. He knew his stuff, but more important, he knew the Lord and learned to trust him through the good and the bad. He had confronted hostility, both human and demonic, taken beatings several times, threatened with death several times, spent years in and out of prison, as we will continue to see, I should say, this is going to happen. But he kept on going. We'll see him before the Greeks, their philosophers. We've seen him before the Greeks and their philosophers, the Romans, their authorities, both military and civilian, the Jews, the humble, the proud, the religious, the leaders, the lawyers, and the fanatics. In the meantime, he has his own physical issues as he gets older, especially his eyes. We also see that he had some conflicts with his fellow believers. On the other side, those he's come in contact with, they have different attitudes towards him and his message, not unlike what Jesus had to go through. Paul knew how to deal with those hostile to the gospel. Some not only did not want to hear the gospel or the truth, but did not want anyone else to, wanted to stop him from spreading the good news. Then there were those like the Roman soldiers who just went about their job, going through their routines, not fazed by any of this of what's going on. They take no serious interest in it. They do not even give the message of eternal life a listen. They're not interested. Now, as Christians, as growing Christians, if you live very long, you'll face very similar types of people and circumstances. You'll come across people who just come up and basically say, how are you saved? What do I have to do? And then you may come across some who don't even want to talk to you about anything, especially the gospel. One of the things we've seen here, and this is a great lesson to learn if you haven't learned this in your life, and I think many Christians do, even those who have been a Christian for a short time, that God is sovereign. He's in control. Nothing takes him by surprise. Nothing is too powerful in this world for him not to overcome. Now, we've seen Paul experience the sovereignty of God in his life many times in many ways. Sometimes Paul not knowing what was going to happen or where it was going. He didn't know where this thing was going that he's under right now, the situation he's in now. But he did know that God cared for him. He learns this throughout the course of his missionary career. You know, there's a fundamental truth that all Christians need to live by. When you live for the Lord, He will provide everything you need. Just remember that. You say, well, I've run short on food sometimes. He says, you needed to run short on food for a while. Perhaps to develop your faith. Whatever the reason, it was all in God's plan. I faced hostility and I didn't do anything wrong. That's not untypical for someone who gives a constant witness in both their words and their life. Paul knew God loved him and cared for him, and he had a purpose that God had given him, and if he stayed with the purpose, God would stay with him, so to speak. Paul learned to live in pleasant and not so pleasant circumstances. To him, life was not just about seeking the pleasures or even the comforts of this world, but constantly giving everyday service to the Lord. I know that I find in myself, just as I am getting closer to age 70, that the physical discomforts just seem to never leave. There seems to always be some pain, sometimes more severe, of something. And I'm not saying this for sympathy, but that is very normal. As you know, hearing starts to go. I've had that. Part of that was because of probably the military. The eyes, I've talked about that before. My eyes have given me problems for years and don't seem to be improving. I just find some medication or a treatment that helps me get through it. And I've had other injuries as well, but this is normal. As you get older, you're not as sharp in your reactions and your thinking and your physical movements, that type of thing. Now, we know that as you get even older, even though some preachers go strong into their 80s, which is a wonderful thing, but some don't. God will provide everything I need up to the moment He's ready to take me home. It couldn't be any better than that. Stay with Him. Stay holy. Be faithful. Learn from these accounts. Learn from the life of Paul, his applications. It got desperate for him. He hurt. He got afraid. He got very uncomfortable. God provided. And as growing Christians, we'll face similar experiences. And remember the sovereignty of God. Never forget the sovereignty of God. Well, let's close by reading the translation of what we covered today. We go back up to verse 9 of chapter 23. Then a great commotion arose, and some of the scribes of the Pharisees' party stood up and contended sharply. We find nothing wrong in this man. What if a spirit or an angel spoke to him? And when the dissension became great, the tribune, afraid that Paul would be torn to pieces, ordered a detachment of soldiers to go down and take him away from them by force and bring him into the barracks. The following night the Lord stood by him and said, "Have courage, for as you have testified to the facts about me in Jerusalem, so you must testify also in Rome." When it was day, the Jews made a plot and bound themselves by an oath neither to eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. There are more than 40 who formed this conspiracy. They went to the chief priests and elders and said, "We have strictly bound ourselves by an oath to taste no food till we have killed Paul. Now therefore you, along with the council, give notice to the tribune to bring him down to you as though you were going to determine his case more accurately. We are ready to kill him before he comes near." Now the son of Paul's sister heard of this ambush, and so he went and entered the barracks of the fortress and told Paul. Paul called one of the centurions and said, "Take this young man to the tribune, for he has something to tell him." So he took him and brought him to the tribune and said, "Paul the prisoner called me and asked me to bring this young man to you, as he has something to say to you." The tribune took him by the hand and going aside asked him privately, "What is it that you have to tell me?" And he said, "The Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul to the council tomorrow, as if they were going to inquire more thoroughly about him. But do not be persuaded by them, for more than 40 of their men are lying in ambush for him, who have bound themselves by an oath neither to eat nor drink till they have killed him. And now they are ready, waiting for your consent." So the tribune dismissed the young man, directing him, "Tell no one that you have informed me of these things." Then he called 2 of the centurions and said, "Get ready 200 soldiers with 70 cavalry and 200 spearmen to go as far as Caesarea at the third hour of the night. Also provide mounts for Paul to ride and bring him safely to Felix the governor." And he wrote a letter to this effect: "Claudius Lysias, to His Excellency the Governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews and was about to be killed by them when I came upon him with a detachment of soldiers and rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman citizen. And desiring to know the charge for which they were accusing him, I brought him down to their council. I found that he was being accused about questions of the law, but charged with nothing deserving death or imprisonment. And when it was disclosed to me that there would be a plot against the man, I sent him to you at once, ordering his accusers also to state before you what they have against him." So the soldiers, according to their orders, took Paul and brought him by night to Antipatris. And on the next day they returned to the fortress, letting the cavalry go on with him. When they had come to Caesarea and delivered the letter to the governor, they presented Paul also before him. On reading the letter, he asked what province he was from. And when he learned that he was from Cilicia, he said, "I will give you a hearing when your accusers arrive too." Then he ordered that Paul be kept under guard in Herod's palace. Let's pray. Oh, Father, again, we thank you for your word. We thank you that the challenges that we see in Paul's life, that you'll provide us everything to us just as you did him, and that you'll give us the strength, the needs, and that you are sovereign. We ask that we'll grow in our trust in these experiences as we deepen our faith and our spiritual growth and our love for you. Thank you for these things in Jesus' name. Amen.